as Mr. O'Keefe from that video on the screen there was walking to the car, did you happen to notice how he was dressed?
Yes.
And as far as what you observed in that video, what you recall from that evening, is that how he was dressed that evening?
Yes.
And when I say how he was dressed, for sort of the entirety of the time that you were with him?
Yes.
So it's January 28th. You recall, you indicated there was a snowstorm coming. It was cold out, is that correct?
Correct.
And with reference to that, was Mr. O'Keefe someone that would typically wear a coat?
No.
And ever? That you can recall?
Never that I could recall.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, with reference to that same Exhibit 6, if I could publish video number 149.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, for the sake of time, we can start. And yes, you can bring it down. So from that video, Mr. Camerano, what is it that you and Mr. O'Keefe are doing in that video?
Heading down to McCarthy's.
Now,
Do you want the lights on, Mr. Lally?
yes.
Thank you.
Now, at some point after you arrive at C.F. McCarthy's, who, if anyone else, sort of joins your group?
Kurt.
And that'd be Kurt Roberts, is that
Correct.
And how was it that he came to C.F. McCarthy's that night, if you
I texted him.
know? And in general terms, what have you called sort of what that text communication was like between yourself and Mr. Roberts?
Yes, he said he was busy. He was doing something that I texted him that he was a pussy.
And following that text, did Mr. Roberts eventually arrive at C.F. McCarthy's?
He showed up, yes.
And about how long after you and Mr. O'Keefe arrived did Kurt show up?
I would like to say maybe an hour.
And if you know, when was it that at some point you indicated Ms. Reed appeared at C.F. McCarthy's as well?
Correct.
And do you know about how long after yourself and John arrived that Ms. Reed?
I don't. Exact.
Now, with reference to that establishment of C.F. McCarthy's, are you aware, or have you become aware that there was surveillance video from inside the bar that night?
Yes.
You've seen some of that footage, is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Commonwealth seeks to introduce and admit the surveillance video of C.F. McCarthy's as the next exhibit.
And there's no objection, Mr. Jackson?
There's none.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tori.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would seek to publish portions of that video for the jury at this time.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, from that video, the first video. If I could ask you to play from about 7 minutes and 40 seconds, and we'll go through about 9 minutes or so. If you could pause it just there. Now, do you recognize what's up on the screen, Mr. Camerano?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
C.F. McCarthy's.
And yourself and Mr. O'Keefe are not in frame at this time, is that correct?
No.
If you could, using the laser pointer before you, if you could direct the jury's attention to where it was about in reference to the bar that you and Mr. O'Keefe eventually came to congregate that.
These seats here?
And from this video, from your time there that night or prior occasions, can you see sort of where the front door is to the establishment?
Yes.
Could you direct the jury's attention to where that is? And so what I'm going to ask in just a moment is for Ms. Gilman to press play, and then what I'd ask you to do is if you could just direct the jury's attention to when, if at all, you observe yourself or Mr. O'Keefe walking.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if you could. And Ms. Camerano, if you could pause it right there. And just, I'm sorry, Mr. Camerano, you're directing with the laser pointer to the
Sorry.
screen. If you could just describe what you're directing the jury's attention.
That is me, and that is John.
And thanks.
Well-
Ms. Gilman, if you could just, again, play this through the 9 minutes. And Your Honor, for the record, I think we're at about 9 minutes and 41 seconds or so.
Okay.
So with reference to C.F. McCarthy's, you went there, had some drinks, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall what you were drinking or what John was drinking that night?
Beer?
Is that sort of typical for the two of you?
Yes.
And do you recall sort of, was that from the tap, a bottle, or something?
From the bottle?
And do you recall what type of beer typically you would drink or Mr. O'Keefe would drink?
Bud Light?
And do you recall specifically that's what you had that night, or that's just what you would typically have?
Typically, I think we had Bud Light.
And if you know approximately how many beers or how many drinks did you have over the course of your time at C.F. McCarthy's that
I don't.
night? As far as yourself versus Mr. O'Keefe, do you recall sort of in relation to each other how much you each had to drink?
Not maybe 6 beers.
And what I'm asking, sir, is it's not like, did one of you have 10 and one of you had 2, or was it sort of commensurate with each other?
Commensurate, one for one.
Okay. So essentially you're buying rounds as you go along.
Correct.
Now, from your time at C.F. McCarthy's, how would you describe sort of the tone or sort of the demeanor within the group that you were in that night?
Pretty good.
So no arguments, no fighting, anything like that? Group call.
No.
And just briefly going back to the clothing that you observed Mr. O'Keefe wearing in this and that you recall him wearing that night, what, if any, damage or tears or anything like that did you note in any of his clothing that night?
I did not see any.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to take this down and go to the third video. And Ms. Gilman, if I could direct your attention to the 6-minute and 10-second mark through the 7-minute mark. And when you get to 6:10, if you could just pause. Now, Mr. Camerano, directing your attention to the screen, if you could, from the parties that were, within your group sort of that night at the bar, if you could just direct the jury's attention to who is who or who, if anyone, you recognize in the video.
Kurt?
So in addition to yourself and Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. Roberts has now joined your group.
Correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could just play it for me. Could pause there, please. Now, with reference to Mr. Roberts, was he a beer drinker as well?
Yes.
Okay. From a bottle that night, same sort of thing that yourself and Mr. O'Keefe were having?
Correct.
And from where it's paused at this point in the video, who, if anyone else, do you recognize sort of coming into frame or coming to join your group?
Karen Reed?
And so from this, is this about the time that she entered the establishment or came into the bar?
Yes.
Now, with reference to Ms. Reed, what, if anything, do you recall her drinking during your time that you were both at C.F. McCarthy's that night?
She was drinking out of a glass.
And if you know, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the color of what was in the glass?
It was clear.
And beyond sort of the clear liquid in the glass, what, if anything else, did you observe in the glass as far as a straw, fruit, anything like that?
A straw, maybe.
And what, if anything, did you know what was in the glass?
I didn't.
And as far as you could tell, what was in the glass?
Vodka?
Is that something that Ms. Reed would typically drink if you had been out with her on prior occasions?
Yes.
Now, I'm sorry to keep jumping back and forth between, but Ms. Gilman, if you could just hit play again and let it run, to the 7-minute mark. Thank you. Now, Ms. Gilman, from this same third video in this exhibit of the C.F. McCarthy's, if I could ask you to forward to the 14-minute mark, pause there. And if you could, I would ask that you play this from the 14-minute mark until about 14 minutes and 15 seconds, so just about 15 seconds. And Ms. Gilman, you can take that down. So Mr. Camerano, you indicated that your son was at Luce Elementary School for a play of some sort. Is that correct?
He was for a little bit.
And from there, where, if anywhere else, did he go that evening?
He went to a friend's house to skate in his backyard.
Skate as far as just skating, or what if anything else was?
He was skating at a little party.
Well, let me ask you this: was he a hockey player?
Yes, he's a hockey player.
Okay, so when you say skate, he's in the
Skating,
backyard.
yes. Makeshift hockey rink in somebody's backyard.
And at some point with relation to that, what if anything sort of caused you to leave C.F. McCarthy's on that night?
I received a phone call that my son was hit in the face with a hockey stick and he lost his tooth.
And so upon receiving that call, where did you go?
I went to go get him.
And do you recall about what time that was that you left C.F. McCarthy's to go get him?
I don't recall.
Now, from the group that you were with, as far as yourself, Mr. O'Keefe, Ms. Reed, and Mr. Roberts, who, if anyone, left first?
I believe Kurt.
And do you recall sort of how it was that Kurt left?
Kurt just got up and left.
So sort of an Irish goodbye?
Yeah, Irish goodbye, yes.
That's something he's known for?
Yes.
And about when was that in relation to when you left?
Not too soon after.
I'm sorry, not too soon after or not too soon before?
I left after, probably, I'd like to say 15 minutes after Kurt left.
Now, with the court's permission, Your Honor, I'd just like to publish just 2 more segments from this.
Okay.
So Ms. Gilman, if I could direct your attention to the 4th video. 4th one down. And if I could ask you to forward it to about 19 minutes and 40 seconds. You could play. Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to just pause it there for 1 second. Now, Ms. Camerano, from your looking at this surveillance video here, or from your memory of that night, you see Mr. O'Keefe speaking to another gentleman. Is that correct?
Yes.
You know who that person is?
Yes.
And who is that person?
Sully?
And do you know his first name or anything beyond just Sully?
Sully, I don't know his first name.
And how is it that you know him?
Kids play baseball with his son.
So in addition to your son playing baseball with Mr. O'Keefe's nephew, Mr. Roberts, does he have a son that's around the same age?
Correct.
And this individual, Sully, he has a child that plays baseball with the 3 of your kids?
Correct.
Is that someone that you had contacted to meet there, or he just happened to be there?
He just happened to be there.
Ms. Gilman, if you could just hit play again and just run to about the 20-minute mark or so. Now, Ms. Gilman, if you could move that forward again to 24 minutes and 10 seconds. And if you could just let this run until about 24 minutes and 20 seconds, so just about 10 seconds or so. And so, Mr. Camerano, did you see yourself in that portion of the video?
Yes.
And you know what you were doing at that time?
Leaving.
And so prior to leaving, had you sort of settled up a tab or something?
Yes, I picked up the tab.
And then you left and went to get your son, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Gilman, you can take that down, please. Now, Mr. Camerano, you left there and went to pick up your son, is that correct?
Yes.
And following picking up your son, where did you go from
Back to John's house.
there? And why did you go back to John's house at that time?
My daughter was there picking her up.
You went to pick up your daughter?
Correct.
And you recall approximately what time that was?
11.
And when you came back to the residence at One Meadows, did you park in the driveway again?
Correct.
And did you physically sort of go in the house to pick up your
No, I did. No, I did not.
Now, as far as from the time that from the time that you left with Mr. O'Keefe to go to see McCarthy's versus the time that you came back, anything changed as far as position of Mr. O'Keefe's car?
No.
What, if anything, did you note as far as the garage doors were concerned, or any damage or anything like that?
Everything looked normal.
And, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would seek to just publish another video or two from Exhibit 6.
Okay.
And at this time, Ms. Gilman, if I could have from the driveway again, video 152. Ms. Gilman, you can stop still. Now, from that video 152 that was just up on the screen, sir, can you describe for the jury, excuse me, just as sort of what was going on in that video?
I was picking up my daughter, Madeline, and my son, Michael, was with me. Yes, all three of us.
And where did you go from there?
Home.
And when you got home, well, let me ask you this first. During the time that you were at C.F. McCarthy's, you obviously, at some point, you didn't do an Irish goodbye?
No.
So at some point, you indicated to Mr. O'Keefe and or Ms. Reed that you were leaving to go pick up your son?
Yes.
And what, if any, indication did they give to you as far as where they were going, or what were their intentions for the rest of the evening?
They were heading either across the street or to the hillside.
And when you say across the street, what, if anything, was across the street?
There's another bar room.
Is that the waterfall?
Waterfall, yes.
You familiar with that establishment as well?
Yes.
And where is that in relation to C.F. McCarthy?
Across the street to the left, if you were coming out of C.F. McCarthy's.
Walking distance, is that correct?
Correct.
And you leave, you get your son, you pick up your daughter at Mr. O'Keefe's house, and then you go home, correct?
Correct.
And when you get home, about how much longer were you up before you went to bed?
Wasn't up much longer.
And when you typically go to bed, what, if anything, did you do with your phone?
Put him on the charger.
Where's the charger located in reference?
In the kitchen.
And when, following to the next day, about what time is it that you wake up on the 29th?
5:36 a.m.
And what was it that woke you up, if you know?
Phones ringing.
And how many phones do you have?
2.
And essentially one personal, one work, is that correct?
Correct.
Were both phones ringing or one of the other?
One phone at that time.
Was that your work or your personal?
My personal phone.
And get up, you hear that, you look at your phone, what, if anything, do you see on the screen?
I see a lot of missed calls, a bunch of missed calls from Karen and missed calls from my wife's work.
And when you say missed calls, we're talking about one call, several calls,
Several calls.
any voicemails that you recall associated with those calls?
I don't recall.
And so based on sort of making that observation of the missed calls, what do you do with that?
I pick up the phone and call my wife.
And what, if anything, did you learn from your wife about this?
My wife said to me that John.
Okay, sustained.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
So, Mr. Camerano, you call your wife, and what, if anything, is it in general that you tell her?
She tells me that John didn't come home last night.
And she's still at work at this point, is that correct?
Correct.
Did she indicate to you how she came to find that out?
She just she said she's received phone calls from
From whom?
Karen.
From Karen. And then based on that, you have a conversation with your wife about John's niece and nephew, is that right?
Yes, my wife says to me, go get Kaylee. Kaylee is home.
So at that time, your wife tells you that Kaylee is home in Meadows Ave by herself.
Yes.
And so based on that information, what is it that you do next?
I realize that Kaylee's home alone, so I throw some clothes on, go out to the car, clean the car off real quick, and get in the car and go.
When you say clean the car off real quick, what, if anything, did you have to clean off?
I cleaned the snow off the front windshield.
And again, you sort of drive over to John's house to get Kaylee.
Correct.
And when you get there, you pull in the driveway as well.
Yes.
And when you get to John's house and you pull in the driveway, what, if anything, did you observe about sort of the condition of the garage doors at that point?
When I pulled in, I could tell the garage door was open, left open.
Which one? The one to the right or the one
To the one to the right.
And you go inside that door?
I do.
And what, if anything, did you do once you went inside?
Once I went inside, I saw Kaylee. I asked Kaylee get whatever she needed and to come and get in the car. While she was doing that, I started clearing some snow. I thought maybe snow hit the sensors, so that the door couldn't go down.
And so you start clearing the snow with the shovel?
With the shovel that was in the garage, yes.
And after you had cleared some of the snow with the shovel, what did you do with regard to the doors at that point?
So I tried to put them down. They wouldn't go down. Then I asked Kaylee, I think, to re-enter the code to see if she could get the doors to go down, but the doors would not go down. The door.
And at some point, how did you get the...
So there's a red rope. I manually pulled that, shut the door, locked the doors. There's 2 side locks on the garage door, and I went out through the side garage door.
Now, when you arrived at the residence and you pulled into the driveway, do you recall how many vehicles were in the driveway when you got there?
Yes.
And how many?
2.
And whose vehicles were they?
John's and Karen's.
And John's vehicle, where was that in relation to the last time that you saw it when you picked up your daughter?
Same spot.
And as far as the defendant, Ms. Reed's vehicle, where was that in relation to the garage or in relation to the driveway?
It was pulled in on the left side, all the way in.
So in the area of the garage door that you were just speaking
Correct.
about?
Hmm.
And at that time, did you look at the vehicle or touch the vehicle in any way?
No.
Fair to say that your focus was sort of on the garage door and the fact that it was open, correct?
Correct.
And why was that? Maybe self-evident, but why was your focus on
Because I figured John would go crazy when he came home and all the snow was in his garage.
Now, at any point in time when you initially got the call from your wife, did you yourself reach out to John at any point?
I did not.
You know, if I may, I would just seek to publish just a few more videos from Exhibit 6, the driveway ring.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have from those, first starting with video 155, and essentially it's going to go 155 through 158. If you could pause it. And Mr. Camerano, you recognize what's up on the screen again?
Yes, my car.
Is this sort of when you're pulling in to get killed?
Correct.
Using the laser pointer before you, again, if you could just direct the jury's attention to where you observed Ms. Reed's vehicle. And is that essentially from what you observed there, that's where it was the entirety of the time that you were there?
Yes.
So nobody else came to the home during the time that you were there to pick up Kaylee and shoveling out the snow from the garage?
No.
Ms. Gilman, if you could just run. Gilman, if you could play the next video, 156.
Car's locked.
Let's go in the next video, 157. seeing Ms. Gilman, video 158. Ms. Gilman, you can take that. So, Mr. Camerano, what was just in those last 4 videos that were played before the jury? Is that essentially the process that you were describing as far as yourself and Kaylee trying to get the garage door down?
Correct.
And so you leave from there and go back to your house, is that correct?
Yes.
And where does sort of you and Kaylee go once you get inside?
We go into the house. We're in the kitchen in my house, and my daughter. We get my daughter up.
And your daughter then sort of hangs out with Kaylee for a period of time?
Correct. They go downstairs and they were hanging out.
And at some point in time, how does Kaylee leave your house, or where does she go from there?
I take Kaylee home.
And why is it that you take Kaylee home? About what time is it, if you know?
I don't know what time. Paul had called me.
And by Paul, who do you mean by
Paul O'Keefe, John's brother.
And he informed you that John passed?
Yes.
So you took Kaylee to the house on Meadows Ave to be with the family, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Camerano, just a few questions. You and your wife did spend a lot of time with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed as a couple, correct?
Decent amount, yes.
Would you have considered John one of your best friends?
A good friend.
In fact, you were close enough that your children spent a lot of time with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed as a couple and their kids, correct?
Correct.
In fact, is it true that sometimes they would even vacation together with Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed?
Correct.
There was a trusting relationship that you had with both Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed to put your kids in their care. Wonderful news, your kids, your daughter getting into this great school. I think it was called Bishop.
Bishop fan, yes.
Before the acceptance, there was actually a sort of a process, like an open house that you needed to take the kids to, correct?
Yes.
You took your daughter, right? Time just Karen, Miss Reed,
Correct.
running errands, going to Miss Reed's house, having Miss Reed care for her,
Correct.
and you had no issues with that
No.
because you liked Karen. You
Correct.
liked Miss Reed.
Correct.
It was probably, did you say once a week that you would hang out with and socialize with Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
So you got to know them not just individually, but as a couple together, correct?
Yes.
You saw them on most Friday nights, right?
Correct.
You never saw them argue or fight.
Argue.
Matter of fact, one time you were asked about this in front of a grand jury, and you said, I wouldn't even call it bickering, they would just banter together.
I guess so, yes.
You never heard Mr. O'Keefe complain about Miss Reed or vice versa?
No, I did hear him complain about like when when Karen would buy like very nice things for the kids, like he wouldn't like that, stuff like that, or take the kids to get their nails done or something like that.
So maybe spoiling the children.
Yes,
a little bit.
yes,
Certainly nothing to suggest that there was any abuse or anything like that. It was just a matter of fact.
correct, correct.
Mr. O'Keefe had an idea about how to raise children that was maybe a little bit more modest than Ms. Reed did.
Correct.
So you described earlier at another hearing, you described the situation in which Ms. Reed a very expensive sweater for Mr. O'Keefe's niece.
Correct.
And Mr. O'Keefe's response was, boy, I wish she hadn't done that. That's spoiling that little girl.
Yes.
All right. You would agree there are worse things in the world than spoiling a child.
Correct.
Objection.
I'll let it stand.
You never heard Mr. O'Keefe even hint at the idea of breaking up with Ms. Reed.
Not that I can recall.
I want to turn your attention to January 28th, if I could. We saw a video, and you explained what was happening in the video, where some cars were being jostled around. That was Mr. O'Keefe actually moving his car to facilitate Ms. Reed bringing her car over to his house to put it in the garage, correct?
Yes.
Kind of a chivalrous thing to do for your loved one.
Yes.
Didn't want her to be out in the snow if it was going to be a heavy snow, is that right?
Correct.
And the idea was that even that weekend, he intended that Miss Reed would likely be with him and the family for the entirety of the weekend during that blizzard.
Correct.
So she'd have a nice warm place and a dry place to put her car.
Yes.
You saw a video that Mr. Lally played for you of the moment. There's several videos, but I want to direct your attention or your memory to the video of when Miss Reed actually made her way into McCarthy's.
Yes.
You have that scene in your mind?
Yes.
You saw in the video when Miss Reed actually walked into the location how Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe greeted each other,
Objection.
I'll allow it.
correct?
Yes.
It appeared that that was quite an affectionate greeting. Would you agree?
Objection.
Do you agree with that?
They kissed. Yeah.
Would you consider a kiss affectionate?
Yes.
They hugged each other, correct?
I don't recall.
Mr. O'Keefe put his right arm out and Miss Reed sort of nestled into his embrace,
Okay.
and that's when he kissed her?
Yes.
Okay. They seemed happy to see each other. is what I
Yes.
You didn't observe while you were at CF McCarthy's with them, you didn't observe any arguing or bickering between the two of them?
No.
As a matter of fact, they were sort of the normal, affectionate, laughing, happy couple that you were used to seeing, correct?
Yes.
There didn't seem to be any tension between them at CF McCarthy's, is that right?
Not that I recall.
All right. I want to just ask a couple of more questions. During the span of time that you knew them to be together, would you describe their relationship as being normal and caring?
Objection.
I'll sustain that.
I want to just draw your attention to the month before Mr. O'Keefe's passing. Would you describe their relationship to be normal as far as you knew it to be?
Yes.
And on the day before Mr. O'Keefe's passing, would you describe their interactions to be normal and caring and affectionate?
Yes.
That's all I have, you.